I explained previously that bees gather nectar from the flowers. They bring it back as nectar, which is 80% moisture. They then dry it by fanning air through their hive, and when they've reduced the moisture to as low as they can get, approximately 18%, they then seal the honey over. It's then considered ripe, and that is the honey that we can harvest. Once it's been sealed over, the honey, that tells us the honey is ready for consumption. And that's how the bees store it in their hives, as their food source. Once they've dried it and sealed it, it will keep for a year or more in the hive, and as the bees require more food supplies, they can break that open and utilize it for food. So bees store honey basically for the periods of the year when there's no available fresh nectar coming in, and so they store against the bad weather of future. So hives must always have a certain amount of honey in them, 3 or 4 frames of honey. Beekeepers, in harvesting honey from their hives, should always be aware that the honey is the food supply of the bees, and they should never take all of the honey out of the hive. They should always leave 3 or 4, equivalent of 3 or 4 frames of honey in a hive to supplement the bees, to make sure that they can survive until the next honey flow comes. The other thing we can do is we can supplement feed with sugar, which we'll be covering in another issue. Removal of honey is a relatively simple process. You need a smoker, keep control of the bees. The biggest risk you run in removing honey is causing robbing. Bees are made to find honey, and if you spill honey on the ground or leave honey uncovered, bees in the apiary will find it and they will start robbing. Now this is one of the biggest risk factors in beekeeping, probably, in being successful or not. When you're dealing with honey particularly, you must be fairly quick. You bring it out, and if possible, sweep the bees back into the hive using a brush, putting it into a box and covering it. So it must be covered at all times. The other thing is to keep your smoke. You can drive a lot of bees down with the smoke and keep them under control. We split them out and quickly brushing the bees off back into the hive. Take it across, put it into our spare box, cover it and repeat the process. Sometimes you can shake a large number of bees off and then just sweep the odd ones. Back out, back into our box, pushing them up and covering it until we've removed all of the surplus honey. So if we work quickly and take our honey and cover it, and then as soon as we've completed, we've taken all the honey we want to take, then it is important to close the hive down, and you can leave that open like that with an empty box. That's not a problem. While we put that back on, we cover it, and that seals the hive again. We can now take this box away for the extraction. Once it's extracted, the honey is extracted from the frames, then we can return those frames back to the hive again and wait again for the next accumulation of honey before we harvest again. Now harvesting doesn't happen every month. Honey comes in seasonally, and in Fiji particularly, most of the honey starts in May, June, July, August, September, October. This is the winter months for temperate climates, but it's the honey production season for the tropical climates. Our wet season is our low season, which is October, November, December, January and February and March. That's when we have high rainfall, high humidity, and bees don't work. Through that period, we often supplement feed with dry sugar to make sure our hives survive through that period, so they'll give us a good harvest through what we call a dry season. So it's the dry season that is the honey season in the tropics. The wet season is the most difficult period for managing the bees and keeping them alive. So we would expect these hives to produce 25-30 kilos over the next 4 to 5 months. Our best production in Fiji is about 50, our worst is about 15 kilos per hive in a dry year. Our best production has been around 65 kilos per hive on a good year. And that's basing our records over the last 9 years. We budget and recommend on a basis of about 25 kilos per hive as an economic production level. And over 9 years our own hives would have exceeded that, an average of about 30 to 35 kilos. The best recorded production we have in Fiji is on one of the outer islands in Fiji, where they've produced up to 100 kilos per hive in 1 year. So that's exceptionally high honey production. So there is vast variations in microclimates and different districts and different areas within a country. So again, we can't determine whether bees will work very well in certain areas until we put bees there. The only true answer to find out the production of potential of an area is to put some bees there and wait a year or two and test that area. So what we do in our business in a commercial sense is that we have, say, 25 or 30 different apiary sites. Every year we record the production from those sites. The best sites are recorded and the worst sites are recorded. What we do is we eliminate some of the worst sites and move them into the areas where the best sites are. And that way we continuously upgrade our production figures and maintain a higher average all the time by using the best areas. So that's something that will come with time with beekeepers. Most beekeepers in this country have got one apiary in their own location. And generally they will provide a very good income at 25-30 kilos a hive. The exceptional areas are microclimates in different locations around the country. So that's basically the transportation of honey. We're using a wheelbarrow here. You can use a pickup truck. To transport the honey, we put a drip tray underneath. Now that's a sealed tray, which means no honey dripping from the frames is going to go in the barrow or on the ground and be attractive to bees. On top we have what we call a split board or an inner cover, and we put that over the top to make it completely bee proof. So if you follow those rules in removing honey, you'll have no problem with robbing. You must then take this away to a bee proof location to do the extraction. You can't extract honey out here in the apiary, because if you brought an extractor out here and started extracting, all of the bees would go crazy. And this has happened on occasion in villages where people don't understand the nature of robbing, and this is a mistake that has happened, and so therefore I'd like to reinforce that you must take the honey away to a bee-proof area. If you're doing it in a location where you haven't got a good bee-proof building with fly screen windows, you can take it in late in the evening, extract it at night, and return the frames to the hive and settle it down and wash up and clean up in the building before morning. And that way you won't have bees robbing in the building in the morning. So that's the other way around it, to compromise. Do your extraction at night when the bees are asleep.